After I was mugged, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in my own home. My heart raced every time I heard a noise, filled with fear and anger. The worst part? It wasn't just the loss of things. It was the feeling of being unsafe in the one place I should have felt the safest. So, I turned to my daughter, hoping for some comfort. "Can I stay with you for a few days?" I asked. But when she looked at me, her eyes cold and distant, she said, "I don't have room for you. I'm already stretched thin." Her words hit harder than the mugging itself. I never imagined that the daughter I'd spent years caring for would turn her back on me like that. My own flesh and blood. Expecting solace, I was met with cruelty. And when I later showed up at her door, uninvited, I saw something that shattered me, something that would change our relationship forever. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments. The door creaked open, and the scene that greeted me inside was far from what I'd expected. The place was a mess. A torn rug lay sprawled on the hardwood floor, and half-eaten takeout boxes littered the coffee table. My mind barely registered the chaos as I moved deeper into the apartment. The quiet that followed felt wrong, unsettling, as if the familiar hum of life had been replaced with an eerie silence. I called out her name, but no answer came. I stepped into the living room, where the couch was tipped over, like a body left abandoned. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't just for the state of the apartment. It was for what I feared I would find next. Had something happened here that I hadn't been told about? I moved closer to the table, reaching for a photo that had been knocked to the floor. It was of us, me and my daughter, smiling at a family gathering. The corner was torn, and my fingers shook as I picked it up. Everything that had been familiar to me seemed broken. Stale air filled my nostrils, mixed with the smell of something else, something that made my stomach churn. I hadn't been gone long. A week at my sister's place, and in that short time, everything had changed. My daughter's life, our lives, had somehow shifted into something I didn't recognize. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, dropping the photo back onto the floor. This wasn't just a mess. This was deliberate. This was a statement. The silence in the apartment felt suffocating. I walked deeper into the chaos, feeling each violation hit harder than the last. The kitchen drawers stood open, silverware strewn across the floor like a crime scene. I stepped into the bedroom and my heart dropped. Her jewelry box, the one I had given her on her 18th birthday, was missing. I felt dizzy as the weight of it hit me. This wasn't just a home. This was a place where memories had been torn apart. And somewhere, someone I thought I knew, had done this. Who would do this? I whispered, though I knew the answer was staring me in the face. The thought crept in slowly, but it made my blood run cold. Someone who knew exactly where everything was. I stood there for a moment, my body still, not knowing whether to call the police or to pick up the phone and ask my daughter what had happened. But as I stared at the destruction around me, I realized something else. This wasn't just a random robbery. This had been planned. Someone had watched, waited, and taken everything they knew was valuable to me. I sank into the chair, the only piece of furniture still standing. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had happened. I needed help, but asking my daughter was no longer an option. I had already seen the way she looked at me. A stranger, someone to avoid. And as I fumbled for my phone, my hand trembled more than I would have liked to admit. What was happening to my family? I dialed my son's number, hoping for the support I had been denied, but the phone rang for what felt like an eternity before he picked up. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" His voice sounded distant, distracted. I could hardly find the words. I hadn't expected to be in this position, needing someone, anyone, to show up for me. I need to stay with you for a few days, I said, my voice small, vulnerable. There was a pause on the other end of the line before he answered, his tone flat. Dad, I don't know if I can help you right now. Things are tight here. His words hit harder than any physical blow. I waited for the comfort of a, come stay with us, but it never came. Instead, he continued, I've got enough to deal with, you know? A knot tightened in my chest. What do you mean? You're my son. I just need a place to stay for a few nights, just until I can figure things out. I pleaded, hoping to hear something that would ease the crushing weight of his refusal. But instead, he said, Look, Dad, I just can't right now. Find a hotel or something. The line went dead without any sign of remorse or regret. I stood there, stunned, feeling a cold emptiness spread through me. My own son. The one I had supported through everything. The one I thought would stand by me in a time of need, had turned me away without a second thought. I stared at the phone, my heart sinking deeper into despair. How could this be happening? How had things gotten this bad between us? I tried to shake off the sting, but the betrayal lingered. My legs felt unsteady as I made my way to my car, the air around me thick with the weight of everything I had just experienced. As I drove, the streets seemed to stretch on endlessly, each turn only amplifying the aching emptiness inside me. My son, my flesh and blood, had refused to help. And I couldn't understand why. I reached his place just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across his driveway. The house sat quietly in the distance, as if unaware of the storm brewing just beneath its roof. The last time I had been here, everything had felt normal. Now, it was as if nothing about this place, this family, was familiar anymore. I walked up to his door and rang the bell, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of footsteps came from inside, followed by the door creaking open. He stood there in the doorway, his eyes meeting mine with a look of surprise, and maybe something else, something I couldn't quite place. Dad? He asked, his voice guarded. What are you doing here? I stood there for a moment, looking at him, feeling the weight of everything that had happened in just a matter of days. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady but laced with emotion. May I come in? He stepped aside, but his eyes flickered nervously, like he was trying to figure out what I was about to say. The living room hadn't changed much since the last time I'd visited, cluttered, a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary. Yet everything about it felt off now. I felt like an outsider, standing in a place that was once mine too, but now felt entirely unfamiliar. I took a deep breath and placed my bag on the coffee table. This was it. I had to say it. I was robbed, I began, my voice tight. My house was broken into, and everything's gone. I thought I could stay here for a while until I got things figured out. He looked at me for a moment, his expression unreadable, and then his lips twitched into what almost looked like a smile. But it was hollow, forced. Dad, I can't just. I don't know what you expect me to do. I was already feeling the sting of his words. But I couldn't back down now. What happened to family? I asked, my voice a little shakier than I'd intended. When did this happen? When did you stop being there for me? The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I had expected some kind of reaction, some show of concern, but instead I was met with nothing but distance. His eyes avoided mine, and I knew, without him saying a word, that he wasn't going to help me. But I didn't leave just yet. No, I needed to say more. I just need a place to stay for a few days, son. I don't have anyone else. The desperation in my voice was becoming harder to hide, and I saw it then. The hesitation, the internal battle in his eyes, but still, he didn't relent. Finally, he shook his head. "I can't do it, Dad. You have to understand. I can't." The rejection hit harder than anything that had happened to me in the last few weeks. And with it came a realization I had been avoiding. I had always been the one to give, to support. But now, in my time of need, I was standing alone. My own son, my own flesh and blood, had turned his back on me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make him see the selfishness in his words. But I couldn't. Instead, I picked up my bag and walked back out the door, the weight of his refusal hanging heavy in the air behind me. I got into my car and started the engine, my hands trembling as I drove away, not knowing where to go, not knowing who I could turn to next. The streetlights blurred past as I drove aimlessly. The world outside seemed so much bigger now, and I felt so much smaller in it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My mind kept circling back to the same thought: someone knows too much. As I drove, the streets blurred into a haze of light and shadow, my thoughts scattered in every direction. My son's refusal to help wasn't just about his inability to offer shelter, it was a refusal to face the truth. It was a rejection of everything I had ever taught him about family, about loyalty. I tried calling a few other people, friends, old acquaintances, but no one seemed to pick up. I felt like a ghost, drifting through a world that didn't care about me anymore. I couldn't go back to my own house, not yet. Not with the feeling of intrusion lingering in every corner. I needed to clear my head, to find some semblance of peace. I ended up at Frank's place, a few blocks away. He'd been a neighbor for years, someone I could always count on. His door was open, as usual, and he greeted me with that familiar smile, one that was as warm as the coffee he always seemed to have brewing. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low with concern as he stepped aside, letting me in. I shook my head, feeling the weight of the day crash down on me all at once. "I don't know, Frank. I don't know what to do anymore." I slumped into his worn-out armchair, exhausted both physically and emotionally. The last few days had drained me. First the robbery, then the rejection from my son, and now the realization that I was alone in a way I'd never expected. Frank didn't say anything right away. Instead, he simply sat down across from me, watching me closely, as if waiting for me to say more. And I did, eventually. "I can't even get my own son to help me," I muttered, feeling the words burn in my chest. "I thought family was supposed to be there for you when everything falls apart." Frank's face softened and he gave a low, thoughtful hum. "Sometimes family isn't what we think it should be, Rowan. Sometimes they can't give you what you need. And maybe that's a lesson you need to learn." I met his gaze, frustrated. "It's not a lesson I want to learn. I just wanted my son to be there for me. Is that so much to ask?" "I know it's hard," Frank said gently, leaning back. "But you can't force someone to step up if they're not ready. That's something I had to learn the hard way too. Sometimes, all we can do is set the example, even if it hurts." I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of everything again. I keep asking myself if I did something wrong. If there was something I missed, some moment when I should have done more. I don't know if I've failed him, or if I failed myself. Frank was quiet for a moment before he spoke again, his words soft but steady. "You didn't fail, Rowan. You did what you had to do. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their own actions, even if it hurts both of you." I let out a sigh, the air in the room heavy with the truth of his words. Frank was right, but it didn't make the pain go away. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can keep fighting for him, especially when he won't fight for himself. Frank's eyes softened with understanding. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. That's the hardest part of love. But what you're doing is giving him the chance to face it himself. You're not abandoning him, Rowan. You're just giving him the space to figure it out. I nodded slowly, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me, but somehow it felt like a release, like I could finally breathe again. I wasn't alone in this. Frank had been through his own struggles, and he understood. He always had a way of putting things into perspective. Just then, the phone rang, interrupting the silence. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the name on the screen sent a jolt of recognition through me. My heart raced as I answered, "Hello, Dad?" "It's me, Lucas," came the shaky voice on the other end. I froze. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. It felt like the world had paused, the weight of everything hanging in the balance. Are you okay?" I asked, finally finding my voice. There was a long pause, a silence that stretched longer than I expected. Then he spoke again, his voice quieter now, more fragile. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For how I've been. For how I treated you. I've been seeing a counselor, Dad. I think I finally get it now. The things you tried to teach me, I was too blind to see them. I know I hurt you. I don't know if I can fix it, but I'm trying. I felt the tension in my shoulders start to ease, but the relief was bittersweet. "Lucas," I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. "You don't have to fix it all at once. But I'm glad you're trying. I'm ready to talk. I want to make things right," he said, his voice trembling now. "But I'm not sure how to start." The words hung in the air, heavy with the possibility of something new, something that could bridge the gap between us, something that could start to heal the wounds I'd thought would never close. I looked over at Frank, who was watching me with a small smile. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The first step had been taken, even if I didn't yet know where it would lead. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. The days that followed were a blur, but something had shifted. A quiet optimism started to take root, but it wasn't the kind of optimism I had expected. It wasn't about everything being fixed all at once, but about progress. Small steps. And even that felt like a monumental shift from where I had been just days earlier. Lucas and I kept in touch. His counselor had suggested he write down everything he'd been feeling, everything he hadn't been able to say. And so, the letters began to come. Some were short, some were long, but they all spoke of one thing: understanding. He admitted the mistakes he had made, acknowledged the hurt he had caused, and even expressed regret over not seeing things more clearly before. It wasn't easy to read. Some of it was raw, painful, and still full of guilt. But it was a start. The phone calls came next. Each one seemed to carry more weight than the last. The pauses between us, which had once been filled with tension, were now filled with real conversation. We talked about everything: his struggles, my frustrations, our history, and the things we'd never said to each other before. There was still a distance between us, but it was slowly narrowing. I continued my life, not quite the same as before, but still moving forward. The decision to move to a new place, to leave Fremont behind, had been a good one. My sister had welcomed me with open arms, and her home, while far from perfect, felt like a fresh start. Every day I woke up to the desert sunlight streaming through my new apartment, and somehow, it felt like I was finally beginning to breathe again. Frank still called now and then. He was, as always, a steady presence, even from miles away. We talked about everything. Life, the changes in my family, the little things that mattered. He always reminded me that time had a way of healing wounds, even if it was hard to believe that at first. Months passed, and the weight of the past became a little lighter. The space between Lucas and me was still there, but now there was something else filling it, a glimmer of hope. Not everything was perfect, but I had come to realize that perhaps perfect wasn't the goal. Maybe it was about growth, about allowing each other to stumble and learn, to face our failures and move through them with more understanding. One evening, I sat down to a letter from Lucas. This time, it was different. It was a little longer, a little clearer. He had been sober from gambling for nearly 8 months. He wrote, and he was beginning to find peace with himself. "I understand why you did what you did," he said. "And I hated you for it, but I understand now. You didn't do it to hurt me. You did it because you loved me. I'm still learning how to be your son again. I hope one day you can see that I'm trying." I placed the letter down slowly, the words settling into me like a weight I'd been carrying for so long had finally been lifted. I felt tears well up in my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of relief. Maybe we hadn't fixed everything yet, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like we could. The phone rang a few days later, and this time, it wasn't just a brief check-in. It was a full conversation, one where we laughed, we cried, and we talked about the future. "I'm sorry, Dad," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I've got a long way to go, but I'm ready to start making things right. I want to see you again. I think we're finally on the right path." And just like that, the last of the walls between us started to crumble. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. For the first time in days, I wasn't carrying the weight of everything alone. Lucas was finally taking responsibility, finally understanding, and maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to rebuild the trust he had shattered. I sat on the porch of my new place, the mountains stretching before me in the fading light of evening, and I realized that sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do is let their child go through their own struggles. But sometimes that's the only way they can find their way back. As the sun set, I felt a sense of peace. The kind of peace you find not when everything is perfect, but when you've made it through the storm and come out stronger on the other side. The watch, the one I had kept by my side all these months, sat on the nightstand next to Emma's photograph, quietly ticking away. 3 generations of men had worn it, and one day, it would pass to Lucas. But first, he had to keep learning the lesson I'd been too afraid to teach him until now. Love doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes, it's the hardest thing to give, but the most important thing to offer. I smiled as I thought of Emma, feeling her presence beside me, as if she were still watching, still proud of how far I'd come. "Well done, Rowan," I whispered, feeling her love surround me once more. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that everything would be okay. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts on the journey of family, love, and forgiveness.